The question is that the amendment be agreed to. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, can I start firstly just by taking this opportunity also to congratulate you once again on your role as Speaker of this House. Can I also offer my congratulations to the Deputy Speaker Eric Roy and the Assistant Speakers Lindsay Tish and Ross Robinson. I know that they will guide this House wisely over the course of the next 3 years, and we look forward to their rulings and judgments. Can I take this moment, Mr Speaker, to acknowledge the mover and the seconder for two outstanding speeches. Alfred Naro's speech as the mover was, I think, a tremendous speech and a great example of the diversity that the national government is bringing into office. We are, Mr Speaker, the party that's brought in the first Cook Islands Member of Parliament, the first Chinese Member of Parliament, the first Korean Member of Parliament, the first Indian Member of Parliament, Mr Speaker. That's right. We are the party of ethnic diversity, Mr Speaker. And then there's Mr Goldsmith. What an outstanding speech that was. The man who did such a wonderful job of coming second. Sometimes losing is winning. And what a great result that was. A great speech. Mr Speaker, there are 26 members that are joining the House for the 50th Parliament, 26 new members for the first time. If I could offer them some advice, it would be simply this, that for most of you, you will have worked incredibly hard to get here. Make sure you enjoy your time here, because in my experience, far too many members of Parliament spend a long time trying to get here, moan the entire time when they are here, and then try and come back when they've left. One or two on occasional requests. Mr Speaker, can I particularly acknowledge the new members on the national side, Maggie Barry, who will be representing the people of North Shore and filling those big shoes that Wayne Matt had before her. Ian McKelvey, of course, takes over in Rangatiki from Simon Power. Mark Mitchell, Mr Speaker, who takes over the seat of Rodney, and I'm sure will do his very best, Mr Speaker, from your good self. Simon O'Connor in Tamaki, and I do want to pass my condolences to the Peachy family and say how much we'll miss him and his remarkable contribution in this Parliament. Mike Sabin, who's representing the great people of Northland and representing John Carter, who's these days representing the good people of the Cook Islands. Scott Simpson, who's in Coromandel, replacing Sandra Gowdy, our famous Orange Ruffy, and Jane Young, who's with us. So, Mr Speaker, can I also take this moment to thank our support parties that formed this government, United Act and the Māori Party. We campaigned on providing strong and stable government, and Mr Speaker, I'm sure we will do that. And finally, can I take this opportunity to congratulate very sincerely the new Leader of the Opposition, David Shearer. It's always a difficult task being the Leader of the Opposition. I've been there, I know what it's like, and it's not always a lot of fun. But I've got to say, I listened very carefully to that speech. And there were two things that came through pretty strongly in that speech. First thing was that the new Leader of the Opposition promised change. And then he delivered a speech Phil Goff would have been proud to have written. There was absolutely no change in that speech. I'm sorry, but selling the assets, that was the speech Phil Goff delivered, and delivered a 27% result for the Labour Party, Mr Speaker. My only advice, when he said he's going to go up and down the country and campaign on it, that's what Phil Goff said about the tax changes. So, Mr Shearer, be careful when your chief of staff comes and says, let's get a bus and go up and down the country. Just be a little bit careful. That was the first thing. The second thing, though, that came through on that speech loud and clear was something it took me 25 minutes to cotton on what it was, because it took a long time. It was slow, but it was there. It was the quiet sound of David Cunliffe plotting. Seething away and plotting. Meticulously going through the list of 22 people, of which Trevor's right up the top, in the ABC club, anyone but Cunliffe, they're in that club. You see, and this is the problem for the Labour Party. Well, they don't want to hear it, but this is the problem for the Labour Party, Mr Speaker. David Cunliffe does not like David Parker. We know that. David Parker does not like Grant Robinson. Grant Robinson does not like Clayton Cosgrove. Clayton Cosgrove no longer likes the people. Well, he knows I'm right. Clayton Cosgrove does no longer like the people of Waimakariri, but you see, he's not real fond of Andrew Little. Andrew Little doesn't like Shane Jones. Shane Jones doesn't like anybody in the Labor Party, I'm sorry. Phil Goff, we know, does not like David Cunliffe, and Emmett King doesn't like anyone that Phil Goff doesn't like. So I say to myself, honestly, it's not hard to see why they chose someone who'd spent his life in war-torn places like Somalia and Bosnia, because that is the Labor Party as we know it. So I've got to admit, when I was watching this season's version of Labor's X Factor during the campaign, I thought to myself, they don't need David Shearer or David Cunliffe or David Parker. These people need David Copperfield. They need a magician over there to go and sort out their problems. But, Mr. Speaker, because there was nothing new from the Leader of the Opposition, let's talk about what the government is going to do over the course of the next 3 years. You see, Mr. Speaker, we are going to deal with the reality of the global financial crisis and the issues that will be presented to ourselves. Well, I'll tell you what the start was, Mr. Robinson. That was when we inherited 10 years of deficit from a Labor Party. That was when we inherited debt going to 60% of GDP, and in 3 years we turned that round, and in 3 to 4 more years we will be back in surplus. That's what will happen with this country, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we will get out there and continue to create jobs as we have the 63,000 new jobs we created over the last 2 years alone, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Shearer said in his speech that he's going to support good ideas. He's going to support good ideas. So is Mr. Shearer going to support RMA reform? Because this country needs it. Is Mr. Shearer going to support employment reform, as this country needs? Is Mr. Shearer going to support the rollout of ultra-fast broadband? We talked about the knowledge economy. Is he going to support the $1.5 billion this government's putting into ultra-fast broadband? If you want a knowledge economy and you want to connect with the world, Mr. Shearer, you're going to support it. $1.5 billion. Is Mr. Shearer going to support the $400 million we put in to irrigate those parts of New Zealand that can lift our economy? Well, is he going to support the sensible changes this government will make to the ETS? Are the Labor Party, because they're going to support good ideas, are they going to support, Mr. Speaker, the changes to ACC and the need for competition? No, they're not. OK. So they want to change, but they don't want to support ultra-fast broadband or irrigation or RMA reform or ETS reform or changes to ACC or more competition. No, they won't do that. Mr. Shearer said he's going to grow the pie. OK? So is he going to campaign on a capital gains tax on every single business in New Zealand, every farm in New Zealand, every share in New Zealand? Do you grow the pie when you do that? Do you grow the pie when you lift the top personal tax rate and leave a yawning gap between the top rate and the trust rate? Mark my words, you can put a ring around it. They will not be campaigning on capital gains tax in 2014. They will not. He will roll his finance spokesman whether he wants to do it or not, because that will not grow the pie, and Mr. Shearer knows that. Because when he talks about the young couples that walk into his electorate office, when he talks about those people that want opportunities and jobs, go and ask the 500,000 businesses across New Zealand where they're slapping more taxes on them are going to encourage them to employ people. You see, this is what I was looking for. Well, they've got more to say now than they did in David Shearer's speech, OK? That's OK. That's OK. You see, when Mr Shearer said he was going to change, I thought he was going to get up and say, well done to the national government for bringing in the 90-day probationary period and giving New Zealanders a chance. Well, yeah, you see, it didn't surprise me, but that's what change is all about. Mr Speaker, let's talk for a moment about welfare reform. That will be a significant part of this government's agenda over the next 3 years. And Paul Goldsmith got it absolutely right. Michael Joseph Savage also in 1938 said welfare would not be an armchair ride to prosperity. Well, he was right, but he was wrong about one thing. It wasn't going to be a fraction of the New Zealand population. It's now 1 in 8 New Zealanders trapped on welfare, 328,000 New Zealanders of working age. Well, if you want to do something about it, then we need to reform the system. And there will be fundamental change in the welfare system, Mr Speaker, for very good reason. Because my view is, if you can work, you should work. It's a fundamental tenet of mutual obligation, Mr Speaker. And yes, it will cost money. Yes, there will be an investment approach out there, Mr Speaker. It will involve more money on childcare, it will involve more money on job training, but there will be a fundamental change to the way that we administer welfare in New Zealand, and my view is it will very much help those families because the way out of poverty is through work. That is the simple way forward. And they may well be some of the very people that will be supported by RMA reform because businesses can start going out there and building new plants and doing new things. They'll be the people that will be supported by a tax system that's fair. They'll be the people supported by a 90-day probationary period. They'll be the people that will be supported by the capital investment this government will have. Mr Shearer talked about science and innovation and then said he was going to go up and down the country and get rid of the plan that National has to have the mixed ownership model. Maybe he should have just taken one moment because he also talked about education and the need to liberate our New Zealand kids. Well, I agree with him about education and I agree with him about science and innovation, which is why I've given it to Mr Joyce with tertiary education, with economic development. But go and have a look what's happening to the mixed ownership model. So under Labor, there would be no money going into the Advanced Technological Institute. There would be no new campus in Christchurch and Auckland. No, that's absolutely right. There would be no $1 billion for next generation schools. There would be no money going. Under the Labor Party, they'll continue to have New Zealand kids being educated in buildings that were built in 1950 and 1960 forget about a smart board or the internet. These are schools that barely have a chalkboard, and the answer, or you can go and borrow more money, Mr Parker. We had that debate in the election campaign. We had that debate about whether this country wants more debt, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, let's go and talk a little bit about Christchurch because Christchurch is critically important. Firstly, I want to acknowledge the Politician of the Year for his amazing work in Christchurch. Because Jerry Brownlee did an outstanding job with the Christchurch MPs to make a plan possible and to give hope back to the people of Christchurch. And this government, for every day it's in office, will remain committed to the people of Christchurch and making sure we rebuild their city. Mr Speaker, there will be a lot of work to be done, and that commitment will mean that we have to be totally determined and eliminate any roadblocks that are there. And I simply say this to the people of Christchurch in all seriousness, and that is that this government will make sure those roadblocks are eliminated. And if those roadblocks remain, we will get rid of them. Because we have to get out there, and rebuild Christchurch. Mr Speaker, a lot of different things have occurred there in Christchurch. The demolition work has begun. 898 of the 1,297 buildings set for demolition in Christchurch have been demolished. More than 92% of all homeowners in the residential red zone have returned their consent forms to SERA, and over 48% of those homes in the red zone have indicated that they will be formally accepting either of the offers from the government. But this is a government that stepped up for the people of Christchurch. This is a government that stood behind the people of Christchurch. This is a government who on the campaign trail said, we will build a 17,000 seat